Listen, family. Before you even blink, Fivio Foreign just walked away from the entire secular rap machine. Chrisean Rock is talking herself straight into a homicide file on a live stream. Blueface crew allegedly pulled steel at a baby shower. And Cardi B just leaked the exact meeting where every major label declared war on their own artists. And I'm going to prove every single one of those claims before this video ends. Buckle in, because tonight the whole industry mask is coming off. I want you to picture this. Times Square. Not a nightclub. Not a stadium. Times Square, the loudest capitalist cathedral on the planet. The place where every billboard is screaming buy, and standing in the middle of that concrete jungle is Fivio Foreign, the same Fivio Foreign who gave us Big Drip, the same Fivio Foreign who Kanye pulled onto his own gospel-adjacent projects, the same Fivio Foreign who could pick up a phone right now and secure a bag from any major label in America. And what is Fivio Foreign doing? Fivio Foreign is preaching. Fivio Foreign is singing about the Most High. Fivio Foreign is standing in front of thousands of people telling them that the shift is here and that if they don't lock in with God, they are going to get left behind. Y'all catching this? Because I need you to understand what Fivio Foreign is actually risking. When an artist like Fivio Foreign makes a decision like this, we are not talking about a small career pivot. We are talking about Fivio Foreign potentially losing his placement in the streaming algorithm. We are talking about Fivio Foreign potentially losing his radio spins. We are talking about Fivio Foreign potentially losing every single feature invitation from every rapper who does not want their name attached to a gospel record. That is the real cost. And Fivio Foreign looked at all of that and said, I'll take the loss. That right there is courage most of these industry cats will never touch in their entire lifetime. Now peep this. When D1 got on that microphone in Times Square and said, we have platforms as hip-hop artists, that's a blessing. Do we choose to glorify destruction, evil, sin, or do we choose to put God first? That was not just a bar. That was a shot fired at the entire industry model. Because think about who owns the industry. Think about who signs off on which songs get pushed. Think about which content gets promoted on the front page of every streaming service. It is almost never the God-conscious record. It is almost always the record about death, drugs, degradation. And Fivio Foreign just stood in Times Square and said, I'm done playing that game. You feel me on that? Because a lot of you watching right now, you have been feeling something shift in the culture for months. You have been feeling this pull. You have been noticing that the same music that used to hit different is starting to feel hollow. You have been sensing that something bigger is happening underneath all this celebrity noise. And Fivio Foreign showing up in Times Square with a gospel set is not an isolated event. It is a symptom. It is a signal. It is a piece of evidence that the shift is not coming. The shift is already here. But let me tell you why this matters on a deeper level, because I know some of you don't run with a theological angle and that is fine. But stay with me for a second, because this is going to make sense even if you're not religious. There is a rhythm to history. There is a pattern. Empires rise, empires fall, cultures pivot, and every single time a culture pivots, there are early signals. There are prophets, whether you call them that or not, who move first. Fivio Foreign, whether he knows it or not, is moving in that early signal zone. The people who move first look crazy at first. They look like they are throwing their careers away. And then 2 years later, 5 years later, everybody wants to be them. Because think about the Daniel timeline for a second. The prophecy said 483 years from the commandment to rebuild the temple. That timeline ran out. Then there is a gap. Then there are 7 more years that have to play out before the Messiah returns. And that final 7-year window is going to be marked by a specific culmination, a mark of the beast system, an antichrist figure, the whole apocalyptic package. But right before that window kicks in, the scripture says something specific. It says the fullness of the Gentiles must come in first. Which means every person who is going to hear the message has to hear it. And that is exactly what Fivio Foreign is doing in Times Square. He is not just performing. He is delivering the message to a demographic that would never sit through a church service. He is smuggling truth into the entertainment complex. You picking this up? Now let me pivot because we have got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and I promised you a Chrisean Rock story that is honestly, and I do not say this lightly, one of the most self-incriminating monologues I have ever watched a celebrity deliver on a live feed. Chrisean Rock got on camera and started talking about the Ronnie Doe situation, and I want you to pay very close attention to the words she chose, because words matter. Words leave a paper trail. Words can end up in a prosecutor's opening statement. Chrisean Rock said, and I am quoting her, I never killed nobody. I don't care what nobody say. I never killed nobody. Now on the surface, That sounds like a denial. On the surface, that sounds like a woman defending herself. But watch how this plays out. Chrisean Rock then said, "Y'all keep trying to blame that Ronnie situation on me, like that wasn't somebody I really loved in my past life. Alright, cool." And then Chrisean Rock said, "He was doing all that woo-woo or rah-rah-rah stuff." Family. I need you to sit with that sentence for a second. Because a woman who is genuinely mourning a person she once loved does not describe his final months on this earth as woo-woo or rah-rah-rah stuff. That is not grief language. That is not even indifference language. That is contempt language. That is the language of a person who has already decided that the deceased deserved what happened to him. And when Chrisean Rock followed it up by saying the Merlin justice system, they find murderers, they'll charge you with murder and you ain't even do it, I would have already been taken away if I really murdered that man. She did something extremely dangerous. She narrowed the denial. Watch this. Chrisean Rock did not say, "I had nothing to do with Ronnie Doe's death." Chrisean Rock said, "I never killed him." Those are two completely different sentences. In criminal law, those are two completely different defenses. Because you can absolutely be charged and convicted in connection with a homicide without ever pulling the trigger yourself. You can be charged with conspiracy. You can be charged with solicitation. You can be charged with accessory. You can be charged with aiding and abetting. And if the question a lie detector examiner asks Chrisean Rock is not did you pull the trigger, but did you know it was going to happen? Did you facilitate it? Did you communicate with the parties involved? The results might tell a very different story. Now here's where it gets crazy. Chrisean Rock is on a 24-hour live stream. That means her every mood, every casual comment, every drunk moment, every angry moment, every wounded moment is being recorded and archived. And when you watch a person long enough on that kind of feed, patterns emerge. You start to see how a person's body language behaves when they are actually upset about a topic versus how their body language behaves when they are performing being upset. And with Chrisean Rock, when Ronnie Doe comes up, the body language does not match the words. The shoulders shrug. The eyes flick. The tone flattens. That is not a woman devastated by the loss of a former partner. That is a woman waiting for a topic to pass. I'm not accusing Chrisean Rock of anything. Let me be crystal clear about that. I'm not saying Chrisean Rock did anything. I'm not saying Chrisean Rock arranged anything. What I am saying is that Chrisean Rock is acting like a woman who has something to reconcile, and her own mouth is doing more damage to her legal situation than any prosecutor could ever do. And in a moment like this, the smartest thing Chrisean Rock could do is stop talking about it entirely. Silence is a legal defense. Monologues are not. It reminds me, and stay with me on this, of that old Slick Rick record. You know the one. The narrator confesses at the end of the song that he cheated, and then almost as an afterthought, he mentions coming home to find the letter, coming home to find the overdose. And the delivery is so casual, so matter-of-fact, so shrug your shoulders about the entire tragedy, that the listener realizes something is deeply wrong with the narrator's soul. Chrisean Rock is delivering the Ronnie Doe topic with that exact same energy. That flat, dismissive, next topic please energy. And that is why the internet is not letting this one go. Now I promised you a baby shower story, and I am not going to leave you hanging. Here is what actually happened. So the baby shower for Blueface and Chrisean's situation wraps up. The guests are filing out, cameras are still rolling, and something goes down in the parking lot area that people are still trying to piece together. Blueface and his crew allegedly got into a confrontation with an outside party, and multiple witnesses say that firearms were drawn during that confrontation. I'm going to say it flat, I cannot confirm every single detail of that specific claim, because the footage that circulated online is chaotic and the audio quality is trash. But multiple independent streams captured what appears to be a very tense standoff with people yelling, ducking, and scrambling in ways that only happen when weapons are present. And then, on the Chrisean side of the equation, Chrisean Rock ended up in a physical fight with a woman that some viewers are claiming is connected to Nevaeh's inner circle. The fight was not a slap fight. The fight was not a shove match. The fight was a full contact, real swing, real consequences altercation that got so intense YouTube would flag it if I showed you the actual clip. If you go dig for it on the other platforms, you will find it and you will understand why I'm not putting it in this video. It was that bad. And here is what I want you to sit with. This is a woman who, just hours before, was on camera discussing the death of a former partner with the emotional weight of a person ordering lunch. And later that same evening, she is in the parking lot of a baby shower throwing hands at another woman while her partner's crew is allegedly drawing on somebody. This is not a stable environment. This is not a stable relationship. This is not a stable trajectory. And I say that not to pile on, but because there is a child involved in this equation, and children absorb every single decibel of the chaos around them. Every single one. Alright, shifting gears, because Cardi B just went on a rant that honestly deserves its own documentary. Cardi B got on the live and said, and I want to make sure I get this right, Cardi B said, so what do you know what is y'all talking about? First of all, y'all even lucky that I'm doing even music videos. The way that these labels don't even want to pay for music videos anymore, because if I don't know what's going on, all labels don't even. And then Cardi B said something that I think is the most important sentence any mainstream artist has said about the industry in the last 5 years. Cardi B said the music industry got together and had a meeting and said, we're at war with these artists. Now some of y'all are going to hear that and think Cardi B is being dramatic. Cardi B is not being dramatic. Cardi B is describing an actual observable phenomenon. Music videos used to be one of the primary marketing weapons of a record label. A music video was how you broke an artist. A music video was how you turned a single into a career. And record labels used to spend 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures, on a single video because that video was going to sit on MTV and BET for months and generate radio pull for a year afterward. But now, in the era we're actually living in, music videos do not do that anymore. TikTok does that. Instagram Reels does that. Short-form clips do that. And the record labels ran the math. The record label sat in a boardroom and looked at their internal analytics and realized that spending $100,000 on a music video no longer produces $100,000 of measurable return. So the record labels did what capital always does when a spending category stops producing returns. They cut it. But watch how this plays out. Because Cardi B is right about one specific thing, the cut is not being explained to the artists in real time. The artists are just being told, we are not funding this. And the artists have contracts that they signed years ago based on a promotional budget that no longer exists. So the artists feel betrayed. And the artists are correct to feel betrayed. Because when Cardi B signed her deal, and when other major artists signed their deals, the assumption was that the label would fund a certain caliber of visual promotion. That assumption is now void. And nobody sent the artists a memo. And here's the darker layer that Cardi B is dancing around. If a label determines that an artist can no longer generate returns on the current promotional model, the label has no incentive to keep that artist active. The label will either shelf the artist, drop the artist, or push the artist into cheaper content formats. And this is why you are seeing so many mainstream artists suddenly popping up on podcasts, doing sit-downs, doing reality TV cameos. It is not because they want to. It is because that is the only promotional infrastructure the label is still willing to pay for. And AI is about to make it worse. Because right now, a label executive can pull up any number of AI video tools and generate a visually competent music video for a fraction of what a traditional video would cost. Which means the labels have even less reason to sign a check to a real director, a real production crew, a real cast. Which means the entire ecosystem of music video production is about to collapse in on itself. Cardi B is not just complaining. Cardi B is describing the leading edge of an industry-wide extinction event. Now let me pull all of this together, because I want you to see the connective tissue. Fivio Foreign is walking away from the label machine. Chrisean Rock is imploding in real time on a system designed to broadcast her every self-destructive moment. Blueface baby shower turned into a potential shooting. Cardi B is telling us the labels have declared war on the artists. What is the common thread? The common thread is that the entire industry model is fracturing. The old contracts don't work. The old promotional strategies don't work. The old parasocial relationships between artists and audiences are being replaced by 24-hour live streams that turn tragedy into content. And the artists who are surviving this era are the ones who are opting out of the machine entirely, the Fivio Foreigns of the world who are saying, I'll take the smaller crowd if it means I keep my soul. Alright, I want to hit some of the comments from the last video because y'all been dropping some heat and I want to acknowledge it before we close this out. Somebody in the comments said, quote, when God tries to keep you from someone and you keep running back, He's going to give you everything He was trying to save you from. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And I think that comment is pointing at exactly what we are watching unfold with Chrisean Rock. Because there were warnings. There were signs. There were moments where the universe, God, the Most High, whatever framework you use, was clearly saying pump the brakes on this trajectory. And every warning got ignored. And here we are. Somebody else in the comments dropped this. I never went through my husband's phone. When you go looking for stuff, sometimes you find stuff you can't handle or you damn sure weren't ready for. And I think that comment intersects with something I want to say about the culture we are in right now. We live in an era where everybody wants total access to everybody else's life, but nobody wants to actually deal with what they find. The 24-hour stream culture is doing that to us. We think we want to see everything, but when we see everything, we lose the ability to actually love anybody. Because love requires a certain amount of not knowing. Love requires trust. Love requires a willingness to not audit every single second of your partner's existence. And when you strip that away, what is left is not intimacy. What is left is surveillance. And speaking of surveillance, somebody else asked about the phone thing. Should you go through your partner's phone? Should you not? And my honest answer is this. If you have to go through their phone, the relationship has already ended. You just haven't gotten the paperwork yet. Because trust cannot be manufactured by evidence gathering. Trust is either present or it is absent. And if it is absent, no amount of scrolling through text messages is going to bring it back. What you will find is either confirmation of your fears or ammunition for your paranoia. Neither of those things builds a life together. Now I want to close this out with something a little bigger because I have been sitting with a thought all week and I want to share it with you. A lot of y'all keep asking me why God, if God is real, allows all of this, the Chrisean chaos, the Blueface violence, the industry corruption, the whole spectacle. And I want to be honest with you. I do not think the question is whether God is real. The scripture is very clear that only a fool says there is no God. I think the real question that is bothering people, the question that keeps them up at 3 in the morning, is not does God exist? The real question is what kind of God is he? Because a lot of people are hoping for a version of God who is essentially a permissive grandparent, a deity who watches you make destructive choices and just sighs, and lets you keep going and eventually rewards you anyway. That is not the God the scriptures describe. The God the scriptures describe is a God who calls you a warrior only after you have actually endured war. Who calls you brave only after you have been legitimately terrified and moved forward anyway. Who calls you a diamond only after you have been subjected to a level of pressure that would have shattered a lesser stone. That God does not make you a warrior with a wave of his hand. That God makes you a warrior by putting you in situations that require warrior-level output. And when I look at Fivio Foreign standing in Times Square, walking away from the bag, walking toward the microphone with a gospel record in his hand, I see a person being forged. I see the pressure. I see the process. And I see the outcome, a person who is going to walk into rooms with a spiritual authority that no amount of streaming numbers can manufacture. Because you cannot fake that. You have to earn it. And when I look at Chrisean Rock, I see a different kind of forging. I see the warnings that were ignored. I see the doors that were closed. I see a woman who is being handed a very difficult curriculum because she kept refusing the easier lessons. And I say that with genuine empathy, because there are moments in every one of our lives where we choose the harder road when the easier one was right there. Every one of us has done that. The question is whether we recognize the pattern in time to break it. So drop a comment below. Tell me, what kind of God do you actually believe in? Not the God your parents told you about. Not the God your pastor described to you. What kind of God do you personally believe in, and does that God match the world you're actually watching unfold in front of you? Because I think that question is the most important question anybody can ask themselves right now, and I think the way you answer it determines almost everything about how you move through the next 5 years. Alright, family, I appreciate you rocking with me on this one. If you got something out of this breakdown, whether it was the Fivio Foreign angle, the Chrisean analysis, the baby shower situation, or the Cardi B industry drop, hit that like button. Because it genuinely helps this channel push into new audiences who need to hear this content. Hit subscribe if you have not already. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. I pull the sharpest ones for the next video, and if your comment makes it into